Hello, and welcome to everyone. Today, we're going to show you our CAPPS tool. CAPPS was designed to help clients who have had a quicker or to get a quicker and easier way for updating their P6. While we're going through the presentation, your microphones will be on mute. So if you have questions as we go, please feel free to put those in the chat area and we will get those answered as we go. And if we run out of time, we will certainly follow up with answers to those questions later on. To chat, there is an icon on the left side, left pane of your presentation window, and that will allow you to just chat your questions in. So let me introduce myself. My name is Sue Hopkins, and I am an implementation specialist with Emerald Associates. I've been in project and cost and business administration for 25 or so years. I've used uh, P6 on turnarounds, IT projects, capital projects, and a myriad of other types of projects, as well as worked in many different types of industries. Uh, excuse me. Joining me today is Marilyn Backstrom. She is from Edmonton, and she has been doing project management for over 30 years. She is an expert on scheduling and all things Primavera, of course, and she will be taking us through the live portion of the tool today. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick poll and find out how people are updating their schedules in P6 currently. Um, I've displayed it, or I've put the uh, question up there. If you would just answer it, that would be great, and then we can just kind of get some feedback on where people are with their updating for their projects. So it looks like we have the majority of our people meeting and updating their meetings or updating their progress during their meetings, as well as looks like we've got some that are actually getting some contractor XERs in that they are using those to then update their schedules. So hopefully today we'll show you uh, some ideas and a great tool that you could use to uh, actually update your schedules using CAPS. So projects are becoming more complicated. We've got projects being spread out. Larger, like capital projects, are being interlaced with sustaining projects or turnarounds, and they're all being bundled together, oftentimes with joint ventures. What that means is you have different ways of bringing a project online, different ways of reporting, and it just really makes things much more complicated to coordinate with more users, more funding, and that just causes more coordination to be done. Not only do we see the more complex things, projects occurring. But what we find is that with so many projects requiring specialty contractors or special technology, we're sourcing across essentially a whole world of expertise. And that usually means trying to schedule a meeting to get your schedules solidified or updates done is really much more challenging. Some of the surveys that we've seen recently on project failure and success show that project execution and execution issues account for more than 40% of project failure and a waste of project funds. This means delivery, execution, and updating is really important. So, what we find as P6 users is that although we have a really great tool, making sure everyone is getting their updates in is a challenge. So we have kind of a challenge, of course, with our scheduling teams. Some people don't use P6. Some might be using Excel. Some may be working in Microsoft Project. And we also may have some that are just not doing any scheduling at all. So the challenge becomes, how do you get all these different scheduling teams together to agree on what the schedule should look like and how to get it updated? It's just not easy. In fact, sometimes it may become easier for the scheduling team to just take their best guess on maybe an activity's progress. But then of course you're getting, that's not exact. You're getting estimates then, and that just defeats the whole purpose. I mentioned that we had multiple systems that people can work in, such as Excel, Microsoft Project, etc. There's so much software out there. As we continue to become online and with the cloud environments, we're seeing even more and more tools become available. So getting data from those other systems just is really very hard and very time consuming. You also need to make sure that you're getting your updates in, not only on time, but with costs and resources. It's really just not that simple anymore. Not everyone has the luxury of an integrated system. Timely updates can be the deciding factor with your projects, and determine whether they succeed or if they fail. If you only do updates once a month and it takes 2 weeks to gather that information, and get it in, and then put it into P6 and enter it, reschedule, and then look at the impact of those updates, you're already looking at being 6 to 8 weeks behind in what you're forecasting. And nowadays, that's just not acceptable. That means quite a bit of money when you're talking in terms of a project. So getting timely and accurate updates is really critical to execute a project effectively. So what we focused on in CAPS is, how can we streamline that process? How can we get the activities to the right people so the people closest to the progress are the ones who are actually doing the updates? Excuse me. When we get those updates from the right people in a timely manner, we will have just much more time to analyze what those impacts are to us. In CAPS, we've also helped with impact identification. We've added some identifiers for what we call DRs, or deviation requests. So the right people can let us know that there's something that just doesn't look like it's going to go the way that it was planned. And they can get that to us as soon as possible, which gives us time to mitigate that and to deal with it um, faster and in a more timely manner. So I just want to do another quick poll here. And this poll is going to be asking how long it takes you to update your schedule. And that would be from, going into getting the actual progress to up to entering it, and getting really ready and prepared to uh, to get your schedule forecasted and planned and see where you're at. So it looks like people are looking at several days, that this is taking for them to get their schedules updated. So that's really something that is, that's critical. You want to be sure that you can get those things done as fast as possible, and maybe the luxury of a day isn't really what you're looking for. You want to have more on time, more real time types of updates. So now let's just look at an overview of a really high level of how CAPS works. First of all, CAPS is a web based tool. So it can be deployed on premise. It can be deployed in the cloud, as well as some sort of hybrid of those. So if we needed to kind of mix and match those two options, we certainly have the ability to do so. So whatever your requirements are. So CAPS is tabular. So you don't need a lot of coaching to use the tool because it's pretty easy just to figure it out just by looking at what's in the tabs and what goes where. With a quick overview video, maybe, or even a quick session with your users, your team should be able to get up and spend, you know, very little time learning it and still be using it efficiently um, in an efficient manner. CAPS works on top of P6. So we use the P6 API to secure it. And this actually ensures that users are not accessing the data that they shouldn't. And it really makes it much easier to administer. So essentially, the security that is lined out in P6 is followed by the CAPS tool also. So there's only going to be, it's going to be limited by what the access is within P6. So what that means is that your users can self-serve. So if I have 10 minutes at the end of my day to get maybe some of my updates in, I can do that. Or maybe I have a few minutes here and there. It really makes it much easier to do the updating process, which will actually make it more streamlined and you'll get your updates in a much more timely manner. With updates submitted, I can review and either approve or reject those updates if it's needed to be rejected. We have approvals that are available both in CAPS as well as in P6 because some clients just don't need that extra layer of approval. So you can actually approve directly in P6, or you can mix and match the approval methods that are needed on your project. What we've done with CAPS is build most of the infrastructure on what you are already using, which is the P6 platform. We're also taking advantage of what you're probably already doing with activity and project codes. So, rescheduling and then running a variety of reports right there in P6. We're trying to make it as lightweight as possible using P6 as that core. So we're not adding a lot more infrastructure that you're going to have to add or a lot of IT requirements. Those things are actually already built in probably to what you're using within P6. So I mentioned codes a bit. And what we have inside the tool is that we can take advantage of project and activity level codes to do a variety of filtering and sorting, and we can pick and choose what tabs and columns that we're going to display. And then we have the ability to save that so that the next time we come in, we have that right in front of us and we only have the information that is useful and that is pertinent to what we're doing during those updates or in those approvals, as the case may be. So if you wanted to identify maybe a crew or vendor, you could do that with codes, or we could do it with resources, depending on how you use P6. So we've tried to ensure that we're not adding a huge burden to you by trying to use what you're already doing in P6. So with that, I am going to actually hand control over to Mary Lynn so that she can show us kind of a live demo for the CAPS tool.
Okay, just before I get started here, just a quick sound check. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you.
Yes.
Thanks. I just want to make sure because I don't want to start talking and be talking to myself. So, okay. What I want to do is I'm just going to share my screen here. And this is the screen I want to share. First of all, before we go into CAPS, just want to give you an idea of what am I actually reading into CAPPS? Because essentially, when you see the information in CAPPS, before you put any updates in there, reading the information from P6, as Sue mentioned, is exactly what it's doing. So I've basically got 4 small files set up here, and we've kept them small. They don't necessarily have to be small, but for demo purposes, it's just easier. So when you set up your files in P6 and you want to connect them to CAPPS, you can get very creative with who is going to be submitting the updates, who is going to be approving the updates, things like that. And Sue mentioned this is all run by codes. So it's not something else that you have to learn how to use or you have to really expend a lot of effort in setting up. It's just a matter of deciding for your project who is going to be doing the submitting, who's going to be doing the approving, those types of things. So if I go into the activities here, and I've got just one of these files open at the moment, but if I go into the activities tab, this is another view of some of the coding structure that can be set up. So what I wanted to do is give you a look at what does it look like inside CAPPS, first of all, when I log in as somebody who is going to be putting in some updates. Then we're going to log in again after that as an approver. So you can get an idea of what do those 2 scenarios look like. So on that note, what I want to do is go over to CAPPS. And this is what the CAPPS login looks like in case there's anybody with us that hasn't seen it before. And I'm just going to log in. Now, there's 2 logins at the bottom. This first login is to allow me to put my updates in here. So I'm just going to log in. And when it first, it's just been sitting there too long. Sorry, let me just do it again. So I've logged in as a user. Now, this screen that first came up, this is going to look busy to you. But there's a reason that we started at this particular screen because you can see there's a whole pile of tabs up here. Now, these are basically subject areas. So I've got the tasks, the resources, the expenses, steps, successor, predecessor, my DR approval tab, and configuration. So when I'm looking at the information in CAPPS, I can configure it in here according to what the user needs to do. So by that, what I'm referring to is if I've got a user, if I was a person who was logging in here that only needed to do minimal updates. In other words, maybe I need the task, I need the configuration tab, and not much else. Sue mentioned you can save layouts, and I just want to give you a look at what we've got as a couple of samples. So here's the one that we came in with in the beginning, and it's got basically all the tabs that are available. Now, I know a lot of users, if you presented them with that, I'll be very honest, they'd say, this is too busy, this is too overwhelming, I don't want to use this. Not a problem, because I totally understand what they're saying. If we want to give them an environment that's a little easier to use, because the whole point of this is to encourage people to progressively put their updates in as they need to, as Sue was mentioning. You need to be able to get those updates in, you need to be able to get them in quickly and accurately. So if I create a layout, in this case, I'm just going to change to one that's already created. If I have a user that all they need to do is update information that has to do with the tasks, they're not updating expenses or steps, anything like that, I can just create a layout like this. And if I apply that layout, then they're going to log in and see a much less busy desktop. So there's a number of combinations in there, of course, you saw with the list, but what we can do also, just to give you a little bit of a flavor as to what other kind of customization is in here, I can come in here and, first of all, what columns do I want to see? Now, this layout we opened has had columns set up, and this is the layout that they wanted to create. But if I need to change that, that's very easy. So I can go to this little gear beside the project tab and I can click on it. Now, if I decide that there's any of these columns, and you can see it is still fairly busy, showing a lot of information, I can just go in and deselect any of the pieces that I don't need to use. So for example, if I was having somebody use this and they were updating and they didn't do anything with labor costs, they were updating percent complete, start dates, that kind of thing, I can deselect a number of these pieces for them and make it less busy. Now, the other piece that you can use, and you will see me using in this particular one, we're going to look at putting some updates in. But right now, when I log in, there's a filter running behind this user. So the filter that's running behind the user, and they can be set up for each user depending on what their identification for the codes in P6 are. Now, for my login, if I go to the projects, so there's a filter sitting at the top of each one of these columns, but very simply, if I go look at projects, right now I'm looking at all the activities that I could possibly need to update in these 3 projects. If you approach your updates a little more along the line of what I normally do, I find it easier if I do one project at a time. So if I was doing CAPPS version 10.3, the retube file, I can just deselect the others, say apply. You can see my list of activities I've got on my desktop is a lot shorter than it was a couple of minutes ago. So you can definitely customize and save layouts, because in the configuration, I could create a whole new layout and save it and use that. So you can set your people up for success, because you can set them up and make sure that they've got a layout that's going to work for them, that they've got a filter on there that's going to give them the projects that they need, all that sort of information. So now that we've had a little look at some of the ways that we can set the user interface up, and please don't forget that you can go in, and if you're a person that does the updates, critical activities first, for example, you've got filters on the top of all of these. So I could deselect none, deselect near critical, apply, and all I've got is my critical activities there to update. So you have a lot of different opportunities to customize this, and the user does as well. So if they're more comfortable with updating a certain piece, definitely they can create a scenario where that's going to be very easy to do. Now, what I'd like to do now is start walking through a few of the updates. Now, when you update in P6, we're all aware of the fact that there is a lot of different pieces of information that you can update in your schedule. So you've got your tasks. So is it started? Is it finished? What percent complete is it? What's the ETC? All that kind of good information. But also you might be looking at things where I need to look at resources. I need to look at expenses, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do initially, so we can have a look at some of those different pieces, is I'm going to go back to my all tabs one just to start with. Now, please keep in mind that this may be a little too busy for a lot of users. And like I said, you can create the layouts that they require. So I've got access to all the tabs here. So in order to update and keep my list a little shorter, because I don't know about you, but I really don't enjoy scrolling down 4 pages and back up 5 pages, that kind of thing, to put updates in. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to select this V10-3 file. So we'll look at that one first of all. So when I look at this particular file, the filter that is running for this user is saying I'm responsible for updating milestones. I'm responsible for looking after some of these level of effort pieces and the activities. Now, the columns that we've got set up here, and again, it may look a little too busy for you, but I did show you that you can make these a lot shorter so that you've only got smaller pieces of information on the tab for the person if they don't need some of this. We wanted you to be aware of what's actually in here. So when I update an activity, you'll notice if I scroll over, I can update all the activity pieces in here. So budgeted labor, actual labor, remaining labor, all of that information is on this tab if I want to update it here. I've got percent completes, I've got original duration, I've got remaining duration. All those columns are available. Now, this is also what you can see in this particular scenario. So if I want to put an update in for a milestone, for example, milestones are pretty simple things. We don't really do a lot of updating. They're either done or they're not done, basically. So if I am going to update the engineering complete one, for example, this is just as simple as it gets because all I need to do is click the actual start. Now, you'll notice that my state icon even turns the blue from P6. So this whole scenario is kept along the lines of what you would see in P6. Now, this file has some information that has already been updated in it, but we're going to put a little bit more in here. And there is a couple of items I just want to bring your attention to, because we've got some different types of activities in here. So if we go in here, and I'm just going to see if I can move this up a little bit here because I'm kind of, no, it's not going to let me. Okay, that's fine. It's cutting off the bottom of my screen just a little bit, not a huge deal. So that's fine. So if we go in and we look at the information for our activities, you'll notice one of the columns we've got here is percent complete type. So we can have any activity type go to CAPPS and get updated there. So it's not a tool that you can only update a certain type of activity. So if I have my information on my screen and I want to move my columns around, I can, by the way, grab the columns and just move them across as well. But if I'm looking to update a duration percent complete, I've updated a milestone, but let's update a couple of other elements as well. So we've got some duration percent complete here. Now I can show that as started. I can put percent complete off of a list or type it in. I can also put in remaining duration, that type of scenario. So if I've got physical percent complete, now one of the things to be aware of with physical percent complete is we have activities in this file that are physical percent complete, but they're being controlled, their status is being controlled by steps. So steps, whether you've ever used them or not, steps are very useful in P6, but what a lot of people find with them is they're pretty tough to update inside P6. So here, it's made very, very easy, because if I go to one of these activities and it's a physical percent complete activity, and I click the drop down here and I don't get a drop down, there's something the software is telling me in the background. It's telling me that there is steps controlling the percent complete. That's why it's not letting me set it right there. But I can still either start that activity on this tab, or I can go over to the steps tab and update those activities right from this steps tab. So when I'm looking at these activities in the steps tab, you'll notice I've got the activity here, but this particular Gantt bar doesn't show it started. If I don't want to do the actual start dates in the task tab, I can just go in here and I can go to the activity, for example, E2EXT040, and I can say start it. And I save it. So now the activity is started, and I can go down, and if I've completed the first step, and I've completed the second step, completed the third step. But maybe when I get to the fourth step, it's only 10% complete, that kind of thing. I can actually set the percent in here, either pick it off the list or type it in, whichever you need. So you can update, and you'll notice that this is still maintaining the actual start. So you can update right from, for example, the step tab. Now, if I've got an activity that I need to update and it's not being controlled by steps, we have a few in here that don't have the steps in them. So if I go back over to tasks and I go to one of the activities that is not being controlled by steps, and you'll notice I've got 2 pages here, so I'm just going to go to the second page. Let's have a look at a little bit of a different scenario here. So if I look at C1 MIN 065, this particular one is physical percent complete. If I can pull this column in just a little bit here, you'll see it a little better. So here's the activity that I was referring to. All of these, in fact, are physical percent complete. Now, this activity, if I need to update that particular activity, I can start it. Now, it is physical percent complete. So I could type in a percent, or I can pick it off the list. And now physical percent complete, this operates the same as what it would if you were dealing direct in P6. Physical is you need to give it percent complete and remaining duration. So in that case, here's my original duration. And for remaining duration, what I need to do, if I'm 50% complete, I need to tell it what the remaining duration is. Now, one thing you'll notice is this number changes when I go to update it, because it's equating back right now to the 8-hour day that this schedule is built on. So if I wanted to update this, and because it's physical, these two don't have to be exactly in line. They need to be what the reality of the game is. So 190 and 23.75 days, that type of scenario. So I can update that piece separate. Now, if I look a little farther over on this particular activity, if I need to suspend or resume that activity, I've got access to those two dates in the columns. I can also put an expected finish on it. I can put updates to my labor units for my labor resources. So if I want to look at this information, you can see that we've got in this particular task tab, we've got access to the budget and remaining on the resources for the activity. Now, if I want to instead go over to the resources, I can go and see that information in the resource tab. So you've got a lot of different ways of approaching your updates. And I'm not trying to make it look like it's complicated. It really isn't. So you can pick which of the tabs you want to deal with the most, and pick as much of the information that is available on those tabs. And then you can come in, and if you're more comfortable doing the task information in the task, the resources in the resource, the expenses in the expense, you can definitely do that. So if we go down here and we look at our activity, so we were looking at, we updated our steps. That's on this particular activity. We went back to our task tab. Now it's C1 MIN 065 is what we were dealing with. Just wanted everybody to be aware of what activity we had updated that doesn't have the steps on it. So if I'm looking for an activity in the resource tab, now I can actually go in here, and if I needed to, I could search for it. So don't forget, I've always got these filters and I've got columns. So if I add my project column, for example, I can go over and I can find the required project, so I can cut this list down. Now, if you're filtering on something else or your layout already has the project showing up, you definitely wouldn't be adding it. But I just want you to be aware it doesn't matter what tab you're on. You can definitely create the same type of filters in each one. So now the resource tab is only dealing with that same file that we were dealing with. So if we wanted to have a look through and update our resourcing piece in this one, C1MIN065, this is the activity that we were dealing with. You can see it started. That information carries through. So whatever tab you want to use, you can see what has already been done to it. So if I wanted to go in and update actual units in this tab rather than, you saw it can be done in the task tab as well, I can come in here and I can adjust it. It's been started. So for the foreman, I could give him some actual hours. Maybe there's 30 hours this week. And for the site work, it was a budget of 508. Maybe I've got 254 left. So I can adjust this as I need to. Now, when you look at expenses, same idea. Any of the activities that you're updating expenses on, you've got all the information here. So I could come in here as well. And if I'm looking for an activity, my MIN065, this particular activity doesn't have expenses on it. But if I'm updating one that does, I can come in here and do the same thing. Now, one of the things to be aware of here is I've got a successor predecessor tab. This is for viewing. This is information that we want to be able to display for people. So you may want to take these off of the layout if it's not something somebody's really going to need to use, that kind of thing. So as we discussed before, make their desktop as user-friendly as possible. Now, the DR sheet, if I look at the DRs, and again, each one of these gives you the ability to filter by project. So again, I can make this a little less intimidating when I go to look at this particular one. If I want to look at just the one file, for example, and do those updates. Now, if I look at this information and I'm looking for my C1 MIN065, it's right there. Now, if I need to request a DR on it, I can select the activity and I can go over. There's a column here where I can request a DR on it. There is a column where I can say what type do I need. Now, in this case, it's a materials issue I ran into. And you can assign a DR number. So, for example, just very simplistically, I'll give it a number, but you can have a whole system happening in there. So now I've done some updates to that particular activity. I can go and do some more updates to some other activities, but I see I'm getting a little long-winded here. So first of all, let's save progress. So let's go look what happens in P6 when we send this back. Because what it does is it stores the information in P6. But if you are a scheduler like I have been for a number of years now, you really do not want some willy-nilly information coming into your master project and affecting how it schedules, how it calculates when you haven't had a chance to look at what's coming in yet. That just is not a good way to operate. You can blow schedules up really, really easily. So let's see how this is treated when it goes back to P6. So if I save the progress and it tells me it's updated successfully, so I can basically log out of here because I will log in as an approver the next time so you can have a look at what that looks like. So if I go back to P6, now of course, if I'm in P6, the activity that I actually updated is this particular one here and a milestone. But of course, I'm going back into P6, so I'm going to need to visit my refresh key first of all, because this was just sitting cached on my screen. Otherwise, I will not see what's going on. Now, if I look at the activity here, it doesn't look like it did anything to it. Well, that's a good thing in one way, because the updates I sent back, as I said, they haven't been approved yet, so they have not affected my schedule, but the information is there. So if we go and look, I'm just going to change to a slightly different layout here. Now, if we go and look at a slightly different layout, and this one is the submitted items, and open it. Now, when I go in and look at submitted information, now engineering complete, here's one I sent across. Now, there is one up on top here. This one you'll see was sent way this morning. It was a test one that I was sending through to make sure that it actually hit the schedule and all the connections were in line, all that kind of good stuff. But if I look at my activity and I'm looking for C1 MIN 065, here is the information. Now, I have sent it, so it says CAPPS last submit. That is today at 2 oh whatever it was. Now, it was submitted by Nicole J. If I come across here, you're going to see some other information comes into play here. So CAPPS OD variance flag. I've got a labor units variance flag. So this is operating off your updates. But if I go into this particular activity and I go and look at the activity details, one of the things you want to be aware of, and this is a really, really nice thing to have, I've got the information that was submitted, but you'll notice it has not affected my activity yet at all. Now, the reason it hasn't is, of course, because it's not approved. So if I look at one more tab here, user-defined fields, just going to give you a look at, and if we send across, you'll be able to see right away some of the information that actually came across. So you'll notice when CAPPS operates, it's holding the information you submitted. So even if I don't send all of them across, I'll give you a look at a lot of the information. Now you can see exactly what's happening here. So it's populating the information as it goes in, but it's not allowing this. My CAPPS status is in progress, but yet this particular activity has not been started yet. So all the other information has gone across. My original duration variance, my flag is all there. Any of the updates I put in are going to be stored in here until such time as they're actually approved to have it affect my activity. So let's go back and have a look at what this looks like if we log in under a different scenario. So our first scenario was somebody logging in to do updates. So you can create the environment in there that is going to work best for them to do their updates. And as Sue was mentioning, as they progressively get the updates finished, get them ready, they can put them in instead of, they don't necessarily have to wait till the end of the month, that kind of thing, if it's a capital project, and send them all over together. They could be submitting them in between. So what I'm going to do is log in as an approver. So this is the approver for a number of the activities in the schedules. Oops. My apologies. I will have to do that again because it's bad habit. I just hit enter and that will not send me in as an approver. I need to actually click this login as an approver, that kind of thing. So my apologies on that. So I need EAI PM is my approver user. So once I've put the password in, I need to say login as approver. So when I go in and log in as approver, what you end up seeing here, and again, this is configurable as well. So PM tasks, do you want PM tasks and resources, all tabs, depending on what you want to look at. So if this particular approver layout is a bit busy, don't forget this is the same scenario as with the people putting in the updates. Customize the desktop. So put in the information they need to update, but don't fill it with a whole bunch of other information that's just going to make them feel overwhelmed. That's the way I would personally approach it. And when you're looking at the information in here, and you want to, for example, filter down to a specific file, same idea. You can filter it down to a specific file. Now, in order for the activities that have been updated to appear on this approver's list, this has to be the approver assigned to the activity. Now, you can go through all the different tabs and you can customize them as you need to, and go through and look at the different pieces of information that are trying to be sent over. You may want to look at, if you're an approver and you've got an activity looks like it's not quite doing as well as planned, you may want to look at predecessors, successors, thinking that, okay, if this particular activity, for example, is delayed, what successor is it going to be delaying? So it can give you some visuals here, but predecessor successors does not allow you to update anything. This is visual. These two tabs are for looking at the information only. So if I want to look at the deviation requests, and I go down the list and I look at all this information. Now, when I logged in as the one updater, the person who was submitting updates. Now, you can see here, there is a number of different pieces of information in here. Some of these have been rejected already, that type of information. So what I can do is I can go in, and if there's information that needs to be approved, I can decide whether it is something I want to approve or not. And you may, in this case, be going in for looking at all the projects, or you may be looking at just some of them. So to go in and approve our update, we can go in and approve some existing updates, and we can look and see whether this particular one is seeing the one we updated. But if you want to update this, there is two columns here. And if you've got the login for the updater, so you've been set up as the approver, this is the approve reject. So you'll notice this one says approved. These ones with the red X's have been rejected. So if there is something that needs to be updated, and I've got an I005 here, I can go in and approve this. You'll notice as soon as I say approve, it's got the checkbox. If I click the other, I'm going to get the X kind of thing. Now you've got notes in here as well, and you could put whatever note in here you need to. I could just say approve, that kind of thing. This information will go back to the schedule as well. So if I go in and there is any other information that I need to send back over, I could go to this particular one. So I'm sending back I005, but I also could send back another update that's sitting in here for approval. So E2EXT050, for example. Any of the information in here, it's up to me. Do you want to accept it or reject it? So if you want to go in and accept or reject, it's a matter of going in. And this particular one I just noticed isn't started. So this actually isn't one that's ready to send. So you could send the information back. Now, when you have ones that were rejected, if they've gone in and made the changes that you're looking for, I can go in and you can actually approve it at that point and send it over. So it makes approving this information very easy. So now if I want to send that back, all I have to do is save progress. And once it's gone through, I can log out of here. And my apologies, I'm getting a little long on the time, but what I wanted you to be aware of is when I go back through here and I update this, the pieces that we approved, here's one of them right here. The pieces that we approved, that one is approved. So that change now hits that activity. So whatever information that you approve is going to affect your activity. I have another one from first thing this morning. We can look at that as well. You can see the information does affect the activity. So the nice thing about this is there's a couple of things. What happens is we send our updates in. There is a stopping point here. So they do get approved, they do get reviewed. So if for some reason you developed a little bit of dyslexic typing and instead of putting one number in, you put something in that was a lot different, what you can end up with, of course, is somebody can catch it before it actually hits the schedule. Now, if you review this information, you put it through as being approved, that's when it affects your schedule. And this gives people, as Sue was mentioning, a lot of times it's a real struggle at the end of a week or at the end of a month to get updates in. There's no reason why, when they're dealing with this particular scenario, they can't log in as they need to and send the information over. Because don't forget, it's not going to affect your schedule until it's actually approved. So on that note, my apologies for being a little long. I will send it back to Sue and she can wrap things up for us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mary Lynn. Can everyone see me now or hear me now and see um, the slides?
Looks good, Sue.
All right, thank you. So, just a few people that we want to highlight that we have had that use this tool currently. And these, of course, are not all of them, but these are some of the ones that currently use our tool. And what's great is we have a lot of clients using it all across in different parts of the world. We have a couple of case studies here. One being Petro Canada. Suncor now, I believe, has bought this particular refiner or this production facility. But what they wanted was their PMs and engineering leads doing updates more frequently. They set a requirement of every 2 weeks and for updating, and then at a minimum every month for their cost updates. As a result of implementing CAPPS, they were able to get issues raised and addressed faster, which improved the management of those issues by 50%. One key thing that came out of this was the work that they weren't executing themselves. So the work that was being done off-site, like fabrication shops and what have you. So they were able to track those much, much better by deploying this out to those shops or to those off-site areas. And this allowed them to see where there were some maybe busts in coordination and knowing where they were on delivery and things like that, which is really kind of key to some of these big projects. Sometimes you don't know what's going on outside of your little area there, and then it comes and it hits you all of a sudden, and it's affected your project in a huge amount of time or cost. Another group we worked with was an engineering group, Vico Canada, which is part of CH2M. They wanted their engineering leads to update steps or those checklists, and also update the engineering packages much faster. Because, of course, if you're able to improve delivery on the front end, It gives you much more leeway on the construction side. And what they found is that they were able to put together those engineering packages an average of 5 days faster than they had to prior to implementing CAPS. So companies have seen measurable differences by using a different updating technology like such as CAPS. Now we've seen quite a few benefits with CAPS. It's quite an easy tool to use and to collaborate with. You don't need a lot of training to get up and running. And what we've found is that, again, updates can be done pretty much every day at the end of the day for a lot of the site users. It's just part of their wrapping up their day. They sit down, they do their updates on what was finished and completed that day or what was started, and they go off and end their day. So you can deploy this to like crude leads or engineers and get those updates into P6 really fast without those people having to be P6 experts, which, that's always important because not everyone is trained up on using P6 the way that some of the rest of us are. So your costs, you're going to see a savings in, especially in meetings, because we see clients who do their updates in, hour-long meetings at the end of every day. And this is with a numerous amount of people, like 25, sitting in a meeting, just doing updates for the majority of the meeting. So that's quite a bit of money being spent for that hour at the end of their day, just gathering updates rather than focusing on what they're going to do tomorrow and how they're going to continue to execute the work. So there's a real benefit in getting those updates prior to those meetings and then using those meetings for troubleshooting and forecasting and changing how they're going to deliver their project. Also, the visibility is much more transparent. Seeing those updates so frequently, you're able to see, where the problems are, and you can understand your earned value a lot better, which is really important to being on time with your delivery of your project. So being able to see those variances right away has made one of our clients, as you can see by the quotes here, those are in green. It's made one of our clients very proactive about going after issues. And in terms of training, again, the lift is quite light. We've had people who have just recorded short video clips and sent those out to users. And really, that's all they needed to get up and running very fast. So it's pretty easy to train your team, and it takes minimal effort to learn how to use CAPS. So in terms of installing and deploying it, it's only going to take a couple of days of effort in most cases. Uh, one or two of those hours in those days are going to be actually installing the tool, and the rest of it is going to be used, just to set up your projects and be sure that you've got everybody set up and looking the way that you would like them to see the information. So with that, I'm going to start fielding some of the questions from our group here that we have. So we did have in the questions here what the icons represent in that BP column. And I do believe that Mary Lynn did address that while she was in the tool, but just in case, we had the green check mark, we had the red X, and we had a blue I. So rejected, of course, is the red X. The green check mark is approved. And the blue I, it means that that particular activity is waiting for approval on that. It's been entered and is needing approval in order to be applied to the project itself. So in the way of any other questions, I don't see any more that have been chatted in, but I'm going to give you, just a few more minutes while I wrap things up. And if you think of something as you, please feel free to chat it in. But I am going to just do a quick wrap up here. So Emerald Associates has been around for over 25 years. We've been working with Primavera tools, not just P6, but the entire Primavera suite of products. From the early days of P3 and Expedition and Monte Carlo, right up to today's P6, Unifier, Risk, and things like that. So we know the tools inside and out, and we know how to apply them effectively for your short and long-term success. We've worked all over the world with all kinds of different industries, and we actually offer, not only the CAPPS tools, but a lot of other tools to help not only with updating, and we do have a TAPS program that actually gives us the ability to quickly update things, as well as we have services for implementation, et cetera, and we do offer training. So with that, I don't see any additional questions. So if you would like to contact us and find out more about CAPS and what it can do for you, feel free to give us a call. Or that should not say Nicole Jarden. That should say Mary Lynn. Mary Lynn has that is her information there. That is her actual phone number as well as her email. You can also visit our website to find out more about us and CAPS and some of our other tools. So thank you for joining us, and it's been a pleasure.